Now, as most of you are probably aware, big major events just aren't taking place anymore. As a result, this year's E3 was canceled. A lot of the companies who would have been at E3 showing stuff off have since moved things to online, having online presentations. And yesterday we had EA's online presentation called EA Play. I assumed we were going to be getting a good look at the next generation of EA games, a lot of their major franchises and titles, and again, things that probably would have been showcased at E3. And after watching the whole thing, the only thing I can really say, I was underwhelmed with the game presentation and overwhelmed with the horrible jokes.
We had an incredible show in LA planned for you. Huge stage, massive setup, these giant monitors. I was gonna fly in on an X-Wing. I was gonna land the X-Wing on stage. I was gonna set off a bunch of fireworks. Then what? T-shirt cannon, bam, shooting out game consoles. Then Carol Baskin, some tigers.
Why? Why does this have to be a part of every hosted presentation? Why is it necessary? You guys don't have to make these bad jokes.
Instead of LA, I'm in my hometown of San Francisco, but we still have the tigers. What's that, James? No tigers. So you lied.
I just, oh my God, dude, it's always so cringy.
But enough talking. Let's see some games.
Yes, please. Let's see some games. The first thing they showed off was Apex Legends. They began by talking about and showing a trailer for Season 5, which evidently was their most successful season yet. The metric apparently that they used was more of you jumping into the fight than ever before. I don't know if that means they're at their max user count or they just had the highest amount of new users that stuck around, but regardless, they're saying that the current season, Season 5, has been pretty successful. With the season, they introduced the brand new character Loba. They did some map changes to Kings Canyon. There's ranked series and some quality of life updates. And then they did a little sneak peek of the upcoming Lost Treasures Collection event. This is going to be adding a new limited time mode. It's snipers and shotties only, with all of the armor being Evo armor, which is this armor that upgrades as you deal damage. They also removed all of the respawn beacons on the map and replaced them with a mobile respawn beacon that every team gets. And there's going to be a bunch of exclusive content that you can earn by completing challenges, as well as some exclusive cosmetics and new heirloom for Mirage. They also said at the end of the Apex presentation that the game is going to be coming to Steam, and they'll be adding crossplay this fall, and it's also coming to the Switch. After Apex Legends, they moved on to The Sims. They did a little Sims community highlight. They mentioned that The Sims 4 will be coming to Steam. We didn't see anything new for The Sims, but they just wanted to highlight, one of their big franchises. And then they moved on to talk about the CNC remaster. So not only is it an old game, a remaster version, but it's a game that's already out, and they just showcased the trailer like, hey, by the way, in case you missed it, the CNC remaster happened. So at this point, we're about 15-20 minutes into the event, and there have been no new games so far.
Now, let's reveal some more games.
Oh, fantastic. Now we're getting some new games. Great, thank you.
Over to you, Greg.
Oh no, not this guy again.
Well, I don't have any buffalo wings, but I do have something just as tasty.
I know they have to do something, and I know hosts are supposed to try to be entertaining, but it just always feels so uncomfortable to watch these jokes. So now we're finally getting some game reveals, and it started off with a little highlight of their EA Originals program, which, if you don't know, this is basically EA supporting indie studios. They started off with It Takes Two, which is going to be this co-op action adventure platformer. This is from the same studio who made A Way Out. They didn't really show much of this game. Again, we just know it's a co-op action adventure platformer. It's probably going to be like a little quirky. This game is more about the storytelling, if their last games are any indication, less about super gripping gameplay, and this will be coming at some point in 2021. The next game that they showed actually does have me intrigued, so this is the first thing in this entire conference that I'm actually interested in. This one's called Lost in Random. This is an action adventure game with this claymation style, which gives me a super heavy, like, Tim Burton vibes, like Nightmare Before Christmas kind of styling. Really, really like the look of this this game. It's all about this little girl character who's like lost in this crazy world of randomness, and she's got this little companion called Dicey. It's a 6-sided die. I don't know overall how people have felt about the releases of the EA original games so far. I think they've been kind of hit or miss. Out of the 2 that they've showed in this segment, though, Lost in Random is definitely the one that I'm more interested in if I had to pick one that I was going to play, and that will also be coming out at some point in 2021. Pretty vague window there. After that, we got some more fantastic jokes.
That's a look at Lost in Random in, man, embracing randomness. I feel like I live that every day of my life. Ah! Do you know I was gonna do that? You didn't know that.
God. Just what is the, what? Is it really better than doing nothing? So then we got another new game, fairly intriguing. This game goes by the name of Rocket Arena. They're calling this a rocket-only competitive multiplayer shooter. It's essentially a 3v3 arena-style game. It features a cast of 10 heroes, each with signature abilities and their own style of rocket launcher. They have dynamic maps, which I'm assuming that means they're going to change and evolve or have some sort of interaction like launch pads or something. And they say that there's going to be lots to master in the game with things like rocket jumping, rocket climbing, and skillful dodging. The game revolves around these score-based rounds where the first team to X number of kills wins. It's got character customization with what they're saying is 100 levels of progression to unlock new cosmetics and rewards. And the game will be launching on July 14th. And they already have lined up their first season for the game, which begins 2 weeks after launch and will include a ton of free content like new maps, new game events, and a new character. And they're also having a Blast Pass, which I'm assuming is just their name for Season Pass. And they say as well that the game will have cross-play support at launch, coming to the PS4, Xbox One, Origin, and Steam. Yeah, this one looks fairly intriguing. I think it's probably going to be one of those niche audience games. It's really tough with these multiplayer-only games as well. They kind of go in one of 2 directions. Either they end up being incredibly successful, like super rewarding, unique, and interesting gameplay, and it manages to attract a large audience, or a couple months from launch, it's hard to find a lobby. It's a really tough, multiplayer-only games. It's a hell of a market because you rely on a player base to keep your game alive. I don't know that I'm really gonna check this game out. I could see playing it for an afternoon, but who knows? Maybe I could be pleasantly surprised. And then finally, what I would say was the star of the show. We got a bunch of info and gameplay for Star Wars Squadrons. A little bit of an awkward introduction.
Hey Greg, how you doing?
I'm great, how are you?
Doing good. Happy to actually get to show this to people.
I bet.
I bet. Fucking A, dude. So they had a little bit of a back and forth dialogue, and they talked about like, hey, how long have you liked Star Wars? And the guy was, this is Motive's creative director. He showed a bunch of drawings he did of Star Wars when he was a kid. Essentially, their whole point was, you know what? A lot of the development team behind Star Wars Squadrons, we're really big fans. We love the franchise, and we're really trying to deliver a good experience. And that's kind of what they dove into in this brief little interview. It started off as a passion project and eventually ramped up into the full game that has become Squadrons. So it's going to be a game that kind of makes that part of the universe feel real, with a lot of depth and detail in the ships and the way you control them. And they want to replicate the skill that it takes to become a pilot, where you know, it starts off simple. You're just flying the ship around shooting lasers, but you can get really deep into doing things like mastering diverting energy from the lasers to the engines, shifting your shields from the front to the back to cover your butt in a dogfight. There are going to be high levels of depth and skill, like you can boost your engines, fly ahead of the enemy, cut them off, whip around, do a 180 and shoot a missile off of your tail while drifting backwards. Basically, they're saying with like the mechanics and the physics of this game, there's going to be room for a lot of skillful play potentially. And then he talks about how the game starts off with a single player story that takes place after the return of the Jedi and has this unique dual perspective where you make 2 pilots at the beginning of the game, one Imperial and one New Republic, and then as you go through the story, it alternates between their perspectives from mission to mission. A couple of other notes: that the game fully supports crossplay. The entire game also supports a VR experience, and this will be coming out on October 2nd. All of this information was too much for our dear host to handle.
You just Death Starred my mind, man. Like, awesome.
So then after the interview, we finally got the gameplay trailer, and this is where we got a bunch of other details about the game. They showed off the cockpit, where you can see a bunch of information about things like power management, targeting, and shields. They showcased the 8 different ships, which are divided into 4 classes: fighters, interceptors, supporter, and bomber. And of course, there's one for each side. They also show the ship and pilot customization. There are cosmetics, as well as over 50 components for altering how your ships fly, fight, and survive, and you can change out your loadout to tailor to different playstyles and strategies. They then dove into the 2 different multiplayer modes. The first one, called Dogfight Mode, is an all-out 5 vs 5 battle that's all about racking up kills and utilizing the components in the match, like these turrets, tractor beams, and mines to try to disrupt and help eliminate your enemies. And then there are the fleet battles. Now, the fleet battles are what they're calling their signature mode, and this is a multi-stage conflict that you can play solo or with friends, where you'll be competing against other players or AI as a squadron of 5. So it's 5 vs 5 as well, but you could play solo with AI, or you can actually do the competitive against and with other people. It starts off with you meeting your team in the social hub to try to pick a strategy and coordinate the loadouts for your ships. And then it begins with a dogfight in the center of the map. Then you have to attack or defend the 2 medium-sized capital ships, and it all concludes with you having to try to take down your opponent's massive flagship. And again, each stage you will either be pushing the line forward or falling back to defend, depending on how your team did. And that was it for Star Wars Squadrons. This was really kind of, I guess, a bulk of the presentation. Undoubtedly the most interesting part of the presentation. It also, unfortunately, isn't a game that I'm super hyped for. Again, it's one of those things, kind of like Rocket Arena, where I could see myself playing it for an afternoon or two. I'm not particularly fond of like ship-based combat though, so I don't know that this would be a game that I stick around with. But you know, for Star Wars fans, and if you like piloting games and vehicle-based games, it appears like they're doing a pretty good job. I like that they have their variety of controls with that cockpit and all of the different toggles you can do between your shields and boosting your engines. And I guess there's going to be a lot of, again, physics-based gameplay, flipping your ship around and launching rockets from your backside. Seems pretty cool, but again, I'm just not entirely sure it's something that tickles my fancy. Next up was the EA Sports presentation. Moving on, I just don't care. I know there's a huge audience. I know it makes EA a ton of money. That audience is simply not me. And that is essentially it from EA for the year 2020. Now, they did take some time to dive into the future, like what to expect in 2021, trying to give us like a sneak peek of the next generation. They had some tech demos. They showcased, different tech stuff happening, some good looking cars, faster loading, and then they touched into 3 of their studios, talking about how BioWare is developing some really immersive fantasy worlds, how DICE is using the tech for epic battles of high scale and fidelity, and how Motive is making a brand new, what they're calling highly ambitious, innovative new game that puts the power and creativity in your hands, like they do with every new generation. They say this wasn't possible before, but now it is. This little snippet, which only lasted like a minute or two near the very end of the presentation, is really the only next-gen stuff we saw. Like Squadrons and Apex Legends were the other big showcases, and then a couple of indie games. It was just a pretty underwhelming presentation. I guess I expected more. I'm so curious if we weren't in the state that we're at, with everyone working from home and that impacting development and timelines and schedules and them finishing stuff in time. I'm assuming we would have seen a lot more if all of that stuff wasn't taking place. As we know, people working from home right now is making game development and a lot of jobs a lot more difficult, and it's pushing back timelines. And I think that's really a large part of the reason why this presentation is kind of as underwhelming as it is. There was one tiny little thing at the end, and that was a tease of Skate 4. But it was really them just telling us that Skate 4 is happening. It seems like development has just started on this. We didn't get any gameplay, no cinematics. There wasn't even a logo for the game. They're just saying, yes, Skate 4 is happening. See you in 3 or 4 years. They didn't actually say that, but I think that's a fair assumption. And yeah, that was it for the event. Overall, pretty underwhelming, kind of disappointing. I don't know what else to expect though, because I know things are not normal right now. Things are a lot more difficult, and I guess I'm not terribly surprised. I was hoping we would have seen something new from BioWare or DICE, or seen more of what's going on with Motive, but clearly they're not in the position yet to show anything for any of those games. Essentially, all we really got out of this presentation was Squadrons. That was EA Play. Thank you for watching this synopsis. Hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for another video coming up and after this one. What I tell you about jokes that are unnecessary, kicking the camera. All right, that's my cue.